So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Sherrill, today's presenter on data rooms and dashboard workshop. So Michael, take it away.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Glad you were able to join us this afternoon. Just a little bit of background on myself. I've been working with the Preccelerator now for the last 3.5, 4 years now, since just before the pandemic, actually. My background is 25 years in digital marketing and web development. Currently, I'm director of product for Square 8, which is a startup based here in Los Angeles, down in the port of Los Angeles. Previously, I've worked with Synopsys in Silicon Valley, managing their public-facing web presence over the last 10 years, and have also done a lot of mentoring and advising for a variety of startups here in the LA area. Also, I'm involved in some angel syndicates here also in the LA area also. So that's my quick summary, and let me go ahead and jump into the deck for the presentation. Everyone should be seeing the blue slide with the data room dashboard workshop intro.
Okay.
Excellent. Great. So in summary, I mean, you have a business, you're trying to operate that business, and you may have discrete things that you monitor on a week-to-week or month-to-month basis, revenue, number of new inbound customers or sales. But a lot of times in smaller businesses, this is a static process, and it's based on looking at your accounting and your books, or looking at data from specific systems. When we get into looking at data rooms and dashboards, we're really talking about ways to be able to aggregate that information and ideally a single portal or location, and then use that single portal or location to be able to also provide you with a means of controlling access to the information, a means of being able to also provide audit trails or history for access of that information also. Let me get my slide controls back here. So in summary, we talk about what they are. Obviously, they're communication channels for communicating information about your business to specific audiences. With a data room specifically, that's typically something where you're storing documents like contracts, financial documents. This can range from employee and HR documents to documents that you might need to assemble if you are perhaps courting a new investor. You want to be able to disseminate this information to them quickly. So you need to have a way to do this. And typically, if you look at the way many small business owners would do this, they would use email. They would have a folder and they would grab the document, email it to someone. That creates the risk of, say, typing in the wrong email address and having something go to someone who it wasn't intended for. If you begin to use these systems to begin to profile and structure how your data is stored and who it's sent to, you can eliminate those risks. If we look at dashboards, we want to use dashboards to be able to elevate and visualize key business metrics. And the idea is to make those available to you in an easy to read format. So that gets into really a perspective of being able to make sure that you don't need to go and jump into some app dashboard, for instance, and be able to extract data, move it into an Excel spreadsheet separately, but to be able to automate that process. So if we look at data rooms in detail, one of the benefits of using a data room is that you have a higher level goal here of reducing the manual effort required to organize and track these documents. So if you have 10 or 15 requests coming in for something a week, as opposed to needing to manage 10 or 15 email addresses and things in your Gmail inbox or Outlook inbox, you can simply add the users to a data room, make sure that your documents are stored there, and provision the necessary access controls within that data room. Makes it much easier for you to deal with, gives you the ability to be able to also understand whether something has been viewed. Maybe someone says, I didn't get that. Well, this gives you a way to be able to centralize some degree of oversight in that process. So reducing human intervention, automating security and control over access to documents, and providing history and an audit trail for access to secure assets are key. If we think about features you would expect to see within a data room, you would look at things like the ability to automatically index documents which you've uploaded. You would look at even being able to watermark documents. So let's say you've uploaded a financial document, say it's an Excel spreadsheet or it's a PDF. If you were just sending that to someone directly, they would get the document, and let's say it pops up somewhere it shouldn't be later, how would you know where it originated? So if you're using a data room with, say, document watermarking capability, you're then able to actually have that document have a seal applied to it effectively. And that seal means if someone else tries to reproduce it or view it, you know essentially where that originated. So that can be extremely valuable. Some of the more advanced offerings include the ability to have selective redaction of content within documents as well. And then also the ability to be able to tag documents with keywords. So if you have documents which are all, say, financial documents and you have them broken down by quarter, being able to label them by quarter, Q1, Q4, and so forth. Or if you have contract documents, stock documents, equity agreements, being able to tag those beyond just the folder level, but actually at a keyword level so they can be quickly grouped and categorized. Another consideration for data room would be having the ability to have time limited access control. So if you know that you need to make something available to someone, but you know that you don't need them to have infinite availability or infinite access to that document, you can define your access control so that they're not simply given infinite access to it. Their access might expire in 7 days or 2 weeks or 24 hours. And that gives you and it definitely gives you a degree of reassurance that you know how documents are being viewed and when they're being viewed. And with respect to when documents are being viewed, there's also where. If you are located in California and you have something, some aspect of your business maybe doesn't apply in certain states or certain countries, the capacity to be able to apply geographic distribution restrictions could be valuable also, which could be either saying that I only want users who are in a certain geographic region, identified to be in a region, to be able to access this, or I don't want anyone in an IP identified in a given country to access this. That can be something that's valuable if you know that either there's a threat or if you know that there are some type of risks, be it regulatory or political, which make it clear that you don't have any business you're doing in a region and you want to be able to essentially have some kind of safe list and exclude them from accessing this. Another additional feature I would point out would be email integration, and there are some data room tools where they actually support the ability to integrate with your email inbox, either via Outlook or via Gmail. Essentially, you wind up having kind of a plugin and an additional area to be able to drag assets or have assets filtered from incoming emails and routed into the data room, or even to be able to have a panel or plugin which allows you to link to things in the data room within the console of your email and send directly from that. So that can be super valuable just in terms of streamlining your process also. And very last here, but not least, is what they call second factor authentication, which is secure authentication. You may be familiar with it now. If you log into your bank may send you a text message or require you to use a secondary app for authentication. That is extremely important because if you are adding users to a system, it's certain that you can add a user to your system, but if there's no validation of who that user is afterwards when they're accessing it, then you still have potential gaping hole in security. So knowing that the system you have supports that means that you're then able to offload with an additional degree of confidence, knowing that the system vendor has considered security at that level and has made the effort to be able to ensure that they are providing additional verification of users. So a bit of a deep dive on data room portion there. And in terms of offerings, there are a number of offerings in the market right now. If you have a small business, what you tend to find is that the offerings tend to be a good number of offerings which are fairly expensive, and that's in the $1,000 a month or more range, and those are really suited more towards larger M&A type operations. But outside of that scale, though, you can find solutions at a much lower price point. There's OneHub, ShareFile, DocSend They all have platforms which are stable and robust and have solutions which are well under $400 a month. Have a variety of different tiers. Generally, the lowest cost tiers are going to be the ones which are going to be most limited, and they'll have a limited feature set. So the things that I discussed in the previous slide, you would not necessarily be getting that for $12 a month. You would typically find that you'll get the best balance of features to cost at the mid-tier levels with data room offerings. And this is just a sampling of offerings. It's not an endorsement of any particular vendor, but it's just an oversight into what's available in the marketplace. So I see it's got some questions in the chat. Check here. Okay, so it looks like we're clear in the chat. So if we look at
Michael, just as a note, our portfolio companies can get DocSend at about a 90% rack rate. So they're only paying 10% of the full cost. That's one of the perks that we offer.
That's awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome. That's excellent.
All right, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, definitely safe to stop there. So in terms of basic considerations, if you're setting up a new data room, it's pretty straightforward for the most part. Things you want to think about are, generally speaking, your planning and your policy. But also, if you step back and look at the big picture holistically, think about the sources of documents and data coming in. What's the first stop for that document? Let's say your attorney is drafting something. Are they using the same platform? Or maybe are they using DocSend? Or are they using different tool? There can be efficiencies you can gain from aligning with the most common sources and the highest volume sources that you interact with. So that's a consideration. Same thing for your CPA or accountant. And the other factor here is that depending on the size of your team, if it's one founder, it's easy. But if you have multiple people involved, training your team not to circumvent the data room and not to circumvent the policies that you create around it. So if you have the data room and someone's sending you a document via email and they don't have to or they shouldn't, you want to make sure that you've been very clear upfront about the reasons why you're using it and the purpose behind maintaining integrity of the entire chain of history for these documents. On that subject also is the notion of the source of truth for your documents. And again, this touches on like the accountant, legal and CPA side, where you are routing these documents through and storing them in the data room, not circumventing your policy and process. Understanding who will access the documents, their role and geography also would be something to take into account. And then overall, just monitoring the data room, things like looking at the history of access, the audit logs. Not something that requires a lot of time, but something where you'd want to schedule time to do that, whether it be on a daily or weekly basis, being able to step in, take a peek, and see what's actually happening here. Do I see any access that looks unusual? Do I need to revoke access for someone perhaps? That's definitely something which you don't want to miss. So it is very much a scenario where you can turn this on, let it run, but you still need to consider that there is a degree of responsibility that you're taking on with deploying it. So with that, with data rooms, so it's a question here from Christopher. Okay, let's see.
There's two questions, one from Gustavo and one from Chris. So
okay. So for cap table management, no, I haven't seen that. I've seen a number of SaaS-based or cloud-based cap table tools, but I haven't seen anything specifically which incorporates that into a data room. If you're generating cap table documents from another system, you could certainly store them in this. But I think that's an interesting angle as to what's happening on the evolutionary side of integrating systems like that into a data room.
And then there's one more question there from Chris. Can Google Drive be used as a data room?
So technically you can use Google Drive as a data room. It has most of the capacity that you would need to have at a certain level. You have an audit trail, you have the ability to control access to documents, you have second factor. The challenge with Google, though, is that with Google Drive is that if you're using a standalone platform for a data room, you can typically, as an administrator, enforce certain access policies. And I think that with Google Drive, the challenge would be, can you enforce an access policy across all users accessing that? In other words, if I have one user who does not have second factor enabled on their Google account, can I block them from accessing Google Drive? I bring it up because the footprint of Google platforms and services is so large that it's a very attractive target for hacking. So I would be a little bit leery of it, only because I think I'd want to investigate the perimeter of that and look against some of the bullet points that I outlined and see how does it measure up on all of these. Because they don't compete primarily in that space, it's a little bit difficult to actually discern that just at a glance. But fundamentally, at a very basic level, it can fulfill some of the basic features of a data room. So I hope that helps to provide some background and detail.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So we can move on to dashboards now. And this is the fun stuff, or at least it's usually entertaining, as long as all the charts and graphs are going in the right direction. And notion here is that you really want to reduce the manual effort required to extract frequently changing data from systems that are running your business. So smaller web businesses, you might have a single web server, you might have a cluster of web servers, you might have lots of things going on. You could have CRM and lead generation, analytics, multiple channels of data. And the question becomes, from these individual channels of data, what do I want to be able to surface at a high level so that at a glance or at a moment, my executive team, my founders can be able to quickly make determinations about the direction of the business and about trends in the business. So surfacing details like revenue, time-based trends, using pie charts, using key KPIs, grid or array displays or calendar type displays, geographic mapping of traffic or sales activity or new customer signups. These are all things which begin to add value. And the level of sophisticated implementation you get to is essentially infinite. Most advanced ones that I've been involved in have been involved things like lead scoring and literally scoring customers for quality of customer, quality of contact when they come in real time, and then being able to reflect that in a dashboard. So on the higher end enterprise level, that's what you can begin to see is things which are essentially akin to magic and things which a lot of smaller companies and startups would love to have. So in terms of basic use cases here, I mean, obviously, quickly being able to source data for presentations. If you need to make a quick presentation, this gives you at a glance access to content. And ideally, it's relevant content, which is supported within the business narrative. Also, it can be useful for being able to understand where you are on your growth stage, and also, things you might be considering, if it's partnership or other activities. Now, this can give you the fuel you need to have, or even ammunition to be able to start making pitches or start having certain discussions. Sometimes you can find that data surfaces from multiple sources, which reveals new opportunities you might not have perceived. And that's a point I touch on a little bit later, because sometimes what you see is that there are opportunities for growth that emerge from what you see in a dashboard, which you don't necessarily find just from dealing with customers or even following your current marketing plan. Dashboards are also really useful for creating a historical timeline. So if you're capturing snapshots over a period of time, every week or every month, you can begin to use those to contribute to your narrative and your story about how your company is growing. If you have a setback, this happened, our traffic was down by 40%. We had a customer abandon us, but we pivoted, we turned it around. And this is the story of where we were before, what happened, and what we've become. So that's a really, really useful reason for being able to begin to get into looking at this as a tool which supports how you build a business. In terms of types of metrics, everything from source of web visitors to total unique visitors to number of customer registrations or subscriptions, shopping cart time to purchase, average order value, renewal rate. Now, these are all the type of things which often will surface in the dashboard. So a closer view of this, this little mock-up dashboard here, really more web focused. This looks at traffic sourced by medium, organic, paid traffic as well, unattributed traffic and referral traffic, and social also. And I'll mention social because social is also really significant, because with so much activity in social media, oftentimes companies will set up a separate dashboard that's just for social media, just to observe what's happening in social media when we create engagement or content in social media. How is that traffic arriving at our site? When they arrive at our site, how do they interact with what we have? How are they making decisions about our product or our service? So it certainly can become a very, very large endeavor, but you can always start small. Other factors here in terms of the KPIs, obviously revenue, customer engagement, and marketing. There are some things which are more technical, and we get into things like web uptime. I've mentored a couple of startups within the Preccelerator where they had hardware devices or hardware adjacent devices, or like software services, where in that case, let's say you have a company and you have a service and you're developing a product which is in the field. It's an Internet of Things device, an IoT device, which is deployed in physical locations. And those devices phone home to a main server every day and then upload data. Well, now you can surface to your dashboard, what percentage of devices that we have in the field deployed have phoned home. Are we seeing a decrease in those? Has it dropped by 5%? If so, why? Is it a network ISP issue? Is it a server issue? So that gives a little bit of perspective into some of the scope here that you can get into, which can really power how you grow the business. And this is what we all like to see, is money, revenue numbers. Are they going up? Are they going down? And this is a case for somebody who's got a kind of a SaaS type widget that plugs into something, into an application. So tracking installs. And I'll also note that this also, in the context of web, there's traditional web, there's also mobile. So this spans everything from traditional desktop and web, mobile, tablet devices, set-top devices. Anything that has the capacity to be able to report to the web can contribute data into a system, which can then be piped into a dashboard. So now the big question is, we saw all the pretty pictures. What's the effort to build and maintain these things? Is this like a huge effort here? So the background on this is that I think in most cases, most moderately or small sized business can put together a very basic dashboard within a week or so. Sometimes as quickly as a day, sometimes within a week. I think that the big thing is you need to look at, do you even have something to measure? If you're pre-revenue, you're probably too soon. If you are at a point where you have revenue and you're signing up customers and you have some velocity and some momentum, that's the point when you begin to look at, okay, so what do I need to have to be able to give me a health metric every day? So from that standpoint, who is the audience? Is it CXO, board members, internal staff, partners, investors? Who's looking at the data? That's going to determine how you structure what you put together. And this also does the fact that you can literally have dashboards which serve different audiences. So you could get into something where you have a specific profile of user who accesses the system. So a CXO gets a specific set of KPIs, internal staff get a different set. You might have customer service reps getting a particular view. So this becomes a tool that is really a hub for the business. Biggest takeaway, I think, from this is that facts per glance value for any audience is really key. If I'm glancing at this, are the key facts which are important to my cohort, are they there? Do I have to drill down? They need to be there. They need to be surfaced. I need to be able to act on those. And evaluating which KPIs are critical versus just important versus nice to have. You're also going to want to take a deep look at that as well. And again, going back to the whole storyline here is that you've got a narrative, press releases, blog posts, social media. all of this data that you're surfacing in your dashboard can contribute to the value that you offer back via those other channels. So if it's new customer signups, a key customer sign up, if it's data happening on social, a post that was liked a lot, these are things that are almost a circular type of scenario where certain social post gets a lot of likes or gets shared by a famous individual. Well, you could surface that in the dashboard, but also you surface it in the dashboard, but also other things you surface in the dashboard may also be valuable to include in a press release, a blog post, or social media. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, is the maturity of your business is a huge factor with this. The product itself, what stage you're at in terms of funding maturity, that's going to have a big impact. You're not going to have a lot of time or resource to spend on building this out when you're early stage. But it's something that if you have in your roadmap, you know that you can begin to tackle small pieces of it and then build out over time. And to delve into the technical side of this, really want to begin quantifying what are the data sources for your dashboard. Do you have data coming from accounting? Do you have data coming from Google Analytics? Do you have data coming from a tool like Crazy Egg that provides heat maps? Quantifying what the potential data sources are, and then what data sources are actually actionable. The data source may exist, the data may be siloed, and maybe you don't have access to it. There may be sources where the data is not siloed, you have an API available, and you can access that data via the API. So if you can do that, then you can begin to link the API to other tools, Google Data Studio, Google Sheets, some of the other tools that are out there, and begin to build on that. The other consideration here, which is deeply embedded, is what are the availability, privacy, and security concerns for that data? If you have PII, basically customers' personally identifiable information, email addresses, full names, addresses, there's information that you need to make sure is stripped out and removed from processing downstream. You can aggregate attributes of data, but you don't want to have that data flowing into systems where it shouldn't be, both for customer privacy and both for just for your own risk profile of reducing your profile. So not a small point, not to be missed. And because businesses, a variety of businesses can be anything from a standard web or e-commerce consumer business to maybe medical or accounting. If you deal with medical, then you deal with HIPAA and all types of other regulations. So there's a lot of things to think about on the regulatory side of what data do we have, why do we have it, where it's coming from, and where it's flowing to. And moving beyond that, if you're going to do all this, you want to automate this, you want to plug things in like a switchboard and have them run and not have to come back. So you want to avoid manual processes. Within all of that, though, then is what's the quality of that data? Are you getting data in where a user is typing it in free form and there's typing in free form text? Because if you're doing it that way, if you're pulling data from that source, that's not going to normalize or flatten well. If you have 10 people entering San Francisco as the city they live in, and they all spell it differently, then you don't have a flat index to what they've entered when you analyze the data later. So considering the quality of data, where it originates, and whether it's deduplicated or normalized will impact the usefulness of what you see in those in the high-level numbers of your dashboard. And last, what's your knowledge management and transfer process for this? Is it one person or two people? Is it a vendor offshore? How do you want to handle that? Who's going to own that? Be it knowing where the data sources are, knowing how the APIs are connected, knowing what the processing rules are, what the credentials are for all of those. It can be a burden, but again, definitely part of the planning process, which is not to be overlooked. So in short, I would say, I guess the last two things here, I'd say you get to work with health metrics versus decision metrics. Health metrics are, is my arm falling off? Is your foot gangrene? Do you need to call the doctor now? Is it time to call 911? Do I need a helicopter to get us out of here? Versus decision metrics, which is, I'm going 50 miles an hour. I need to speed up because the speed limit's 70, or I need to slow down because I'm going over the speed limit. Or I need to turn left or turn right. And then getting even deeper, look at opportunity versus risk exposure. this is not something you're typically going to care about for an early stage company, but I think that for companies that are feeling like they're chasing or running from threats or defensive offensive side, pulling in one or two high-level metrics which may relate to opportunity exposure, either of your existing customer cohort, whether it be looking at things like SEO and keyword traffic and seeing where maybe a keyword search from customers is revealing a new product opportunity, to risk exposure, where maybe you find that a competitor is buying keywords under your brand and siphoning traffic off of your site as a result, or siphoning traffic from the search engines that would be going to your site. A couple of great examples there on that side. So that's a good snapshot. I think the big takeaway is there's a lot here, and you're not going to be able to boil the ocean, and you don't want to boil the ocean. You need to pick some things that are key drivers for your business and then run with those. Start small. Expect the projects to develop over time and grow, and expect to use them to help you navigate as you grow the business, and don't try to do everything. In terms of the tools you can use to build a dashboard, the tool set's available now. Some of you may have heard of Airtable, which is essentially, it's a cloud-based spreadsheet tool, but it also has the ability to be able to let you manipulate data within a table and row or form-based structure. Google Sheets is similar, but again, it's a spreadsheet-based format. Does have some data and connection capabilities through APIs and also through Google Data Studio. Google Data Studio is primarily for data visualization, but again, allows you to connect to Google Sheets and other tools as well. Very powerful, but quite often a bit overwhelming for smaller organizations or single founder operations. Google Analytics, if you have implemented that for web-based property or mobile property, that gives you the ability to get into some really useful customer details. And if you customize it, you can actually start to use it to get some unique customer profiling data, which again flows back into your high-level analytics and KPIs. Pipify is a tool which I discovered recently, which is a rapid application tool, which you can actually use to build web forms. You can use it to collect data, and you can connect it to other data sources as well. And that's actually really useful if you have, let's say, something where you want to connect something, let's say a CRM, into a source and then do a count of leads, for instance. I'm going to skip Growth Scanner and say that Zapier also is an integration tool which can let you do integration between multiple applications. Super powerful, solid track record, lots of extension plugins, works with everything from WordPress to a lot of major online tools as well, Google and so forth, and a lot of major CRMs like Salesforce. Growth Scanner is a tool which plugs into your web application and actually extracts data into that into basically a dynamic dashboard. So you basically plug it in and it will give you a dashboard which you're able to view. And that can be useful for some businesses, not for all, but for some, I think it's a very narrow swath.
I put in into chat the area in our application platform where some of our benefits are, our perks benefits, and you'll see that Airtable's in there, Datadog, and a couple of others that are in this space. So as people are looking for different applications to help them manage their data, these are available with some substantial discounts. They just have to be a member of the Preccelerator to take advantage of them.
So, yeah, those are great benefits, Len. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty succinct breakdown of some of the things that you're likely to encounter. And I can open the floor up to any questions, or if you have cases or examples you're dealing with right now and you wanted to delve into specific scenarios, I'd be happy to help provide some insight and feedback.
So if anybody has any questions, either chime in or raise your hand and I'll call on you while you're thinking of a good question for Mike. The one I have is, At what point does having a data room or dashboard set up for a startup become important? For instance, a lot of the companies that I'm working with here in the Preccelerator are very, very early stage. Is this a bell and whistle that is necessary at the very beginning, or is it something that they should look into once they have some traction, or is it something that they should set up earlier as they get prepared for that, and that way they have something to track their progress?
I think that for a very early stage, I think that this could be a distraction, which they may not be able to fully accommodate. I think that at a basic level, if you're early stage, that something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet for a dashboard is fine. Uh, I mean, the factor here is that most of what I've outlined here deals with scenarios where you have an internal operation interfacing with a number of external stakeholders or constituents. So if you are in a situation, I think I would best describe it this way. If the effort it takes you to maintain the workflow of communicating either the data from a dashboard or from dashboards or documents and other communications that would be in a data room is becoming challenging on a day-to-day basis in the business, that's definitely the point when you know that you want to be looking at a solution. And being aware of it in advance means that you're forewarned, that you know that you at least want to be able to be prepared for it. And that's part of what this does, is it gives you insight into, at the point at which I feel like, say, I'm spending less time on product and more time interacting with, say, investors, well, okay, maybe I need to streamline that. And maybe you can knock out one or two things. So maybe you set up the data room and you only put one set of documents there for right now, things that you're using frequently, and you let this grow organically. And same thing with dashboard. Again, growing organically. If you have, I remember working very, very early on with a startup here that was based in Pasadena. And for the longest time, we used an Excel spreadsheet because some of the data we were pulling was coming from a source which had no API connection. So manually, you'd go through and you'd scrape it and plug it into the spreadsheet. Now, there actually are solutions which will do that scraping in an automated fashion. But again, I mean, you have to stop, take the time to find it, and then implement that. And that goes back to, really, in most cases, when you are dealing with interfacing with a number of customers publicly, and you're dealing with velocity and volume, which isn't easy to sustain internally, that's when you really start to look at implementing solutions like these.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions, either related to the open session slide that's on right now? If there's any of those questions that you'd like to answer, or give an example of a data room you're using, or if you have a question for Mike directly, now's the time to do that. I am not seeing any question. Oh, Lamont, go for it.
Hi, I have a question about data security in healthcare. There's an awful lot of regulation as it relates to privacy and the protection of health information. So what caveats would you offer to those of us that have to deal with both structured and unstructured data, health data in particular?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're definitely on the point there. I mean, as I noted earlier, you know, every business has a different situation, and you know, being aware of what the constraints are for what you can do with the data that you possess is key. Making the decision to apply a tool which integrates data which you don't have authorization to then distribute, you know, is a problem. So I think, you know, the detail point to that is, what data specifically is it that you would be using or surfacing at that level? Most of what I'm describing here, these are high-level aggregated stats. If you're dealing with something where you have an experiment, medical research, pilot projects, then solutions like these for the dashboard side are likely not going to serve you terribly well. But you know, like I said, the caveat for that is, this comes down to what is the data that would be of concern specifically with respect to what you're exposing.
Well, let's just say if we're talking about maybe metrics for disease state management. When you got certain parameters that you want to meet and maintain, that's actually protected information.
Yes.
But you need, if you have to have that information in order to affect disease state management, it can get to be a nightmare.
Yes, definitely understood. So I'm curious. So is this data that you're currently dealing with right now?
It is data that I'm considering dealing with right now,
Okay.
but there are so many challenges. It's tough to know how to approach it, if that makes any sense.
I totally understand that. Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, I mean, for the basic scenario here, I mean, I'm not a medical data expert, but I'm familiar with that, with some of the guardrails around that. You, at that point, you really have to start looking at, you know, from a regulatory standpoint, you know, what are you actually allowed to do with that? And within that context, are there providers who are specific to that space and that type of data who are very niche, who have a solution? Because the solutions I've noted here are very generic. These are great for consumer type businesses and things that are more public. But once you begin to move into the niche that you're talking about, you either need to find a niche provider who specializes just in that type of data store, or you need to explore what the boundaries are within that. As a smaller company, though, I mean, you're not going to be able to reinvent the wheel around it. So oftentimes the answer winds up being that, you know, no, you just can't do it. You know, at the, you know, a smaller stage at least.
Thank you.
Michael, there's a question in chat. The question is, which platform do you recommend when creating a dashboard for KPIs of the ones you presented? Is there a recommended one, or the one that you find easier or more cost efficient, or?
I think in terms of the best solution for that right now, you know, let me go back to the slide, go back to that slide. So, I mean, out of the script, I think Google Data Studio, I think Google Data Studio is definitely, it's definitely in what I would consider to be the lead for that. Being that it has the power and the capability within the tool set to be able to absorb a lot of data from different sources, and also to be able to present that concisely. I think also you have to think about what is, you know, what is your business and what is the scale of the business. But I think that just for something that's kind of straightforward out of the box, I think it actually works well for a large number of cases.
Super. Thank you for the answer. Thank you for the question. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to ask?
Thanks, Gina.
Not seeing any other questions, Michael. Would you like to wrap up or have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think the closing thought goes back to the large red text on one of the slides I have here, which is you don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to do everything. You just need to pick something.
Good advice. Good advice.